Maya stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, trying to remember the last time she had put on makeup for anything other than work. Her hands shook slightly as she applied mascara, and she couldn't decide if it was from excitement or pure terror. At 34, she felt like a teenager getting ready for her first date all over again. "This is crazy," she whispered to herself, setting down the mascara wand. Absolutely crazy. Her sister Lisa had been pestering her about this blind date for 3 weeks now. Every phone call ended with the same conversation. "Maya, you can't hide in that house forever," Lisa would say. Sophie is 8 years old now. She wants to see her mom happy. Maya had given Lisa every excuse in the book. She was too busy with her nursing shifts at the hospital. Sophie needed her attention. She wasn't ready. The divorce had only been finalized 2 years ago, and the wound still felt fresh some days. But Lisa was nothing if not persistent, and she had this way of wearing Maya down until resistance felt more exhausting than just giving in. The truth was, Maya had forgotten what it felt like to be anything other than Sophie's mom or the night shift nurse in the emergency room. Those two roles had consumed her entire identity since her marriage fell apart. She woke up, got Sophie ready for school, went to work, came home, helped with homework, made dinner, and collapsed into bed. Rinse and repeat. The routine had become her armor against the world, protecting her from having to think about the loneliness that crept in during quiet moments. But lately, those quiet moments had been getting louder. Last week, she had found herself envying the elderly couple who came into the ER together, the way the husband held his wife's hand while she got stitches from a fall in their garden. They had been married 53 years, they told her, and still finished each other's sentences. Maya had gone home that night and cried into her pillow, not because she missed her ex-husband specifically, but because she missed having someone to share the small moments with. Lisa's husband worked in construction and had apparently been talking up his colleague for months. "David is a good guy," Lisa had promised over and over. "He's quiet, responsible, and he's been through some tough times too. You two might understand each other." Maya had finally agreed to the date 3 days ago, and she had been regretting it ever since. What was she supposed to talk about? Her most exciting story from the past year involved removing a toy dinosaur from a 5-year-old's nose. She hadn't read a book that wasn't about pediatric care in months. She couldn't even remember the last movie she had watched that wasn't animated and featuring talking animals. The blue dress she had chosen lay on her bed, still with the tags on. She had bought it 6 months ago on a whim during a rare shopping trip with Lisa, but had never found an occasion to wear it. It was simple but pretty, the kind of dress that made her feel like herself rather than just someone's mom or someone's nurse. She held it up against herself in the mirror, trying to see what a stranger might see. Sophie was spending the weekend with her father, which meant Maya had a rare Saturday evening to herself. Usually she cherished these quiet nights, catching up on laundry or binge-watching crime shows on the couch. But tonight, the empty house felt different. The silence seemed to echo with possibility rather than just solitude. She slipped on the dress and was surprised by how it fit. The past 2 years of stress and irregular eating had changed her body, but the dress was forgiving and flattering. For a moment, she almost felt like the woman she used to be, before sleepless nights and single parenting had taken their toll. Her phone buzzed on the dresser. A text from Lisa. "Stop overthinking and just have fun. You deserve this." Maya smiled despite her nerves. Lisa had always been the bold one, the sister who jumped first and asked questions later. Growing up, Maya had been the careful one, the planner, the one who thought everything through twice before making a decision. But maybe tonight she could borrow a little of Lisa's courage. She thought about Sophie, who had been asking lately why other kids had dads who came to school events and she didn't. Maya's ex-husband was a weekend father at best, showing up when it was convenient and disappearing when real parenting was required. Sophie deserved better, but Maya had been so focused on being enough for both parents that she hadn't considered whether bringing someone new into their lives might actually be a gift rather than a risk. The restaurant Lisa had suggested was a small Italian place across town, the kind with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles. Maya had driven past it countless times on her way to work, but had never been inside. It seemed like the kind of place where couples went for anniversaries and first dates, where people shared dessert and held hands across small tables. As she applied lipstick, Maya tried to remember what Lisa had told her about David. He was 36, worked in construction management, and had been single for about a year and a half. Lisa had been vague about why his previous relationship had ended, just saying that he had been through a difficult time and was ready to start over. Maya appreciated that Lisa hadn't tried to oversell him or make him sound perfect. Perfect would have been intimidating. Flawed and healing sounded much more manageable. Her hands were still shaking as she reached for her purse. She had told David she would meet him at the restaurant at 7, which gave her just enough time to drive across town and maybe sit in her car for a few minutes to collect herself. The idea of walking into a restaurant alone to meet a stranger felt surreal, like something that happened to other people in movies. She grabbed her keys and took one last look in the mirror. The woman looking back at her was nervous but hopeful, tired but still beautiful, scared but brave enough to try. It was the first time in 2 years that Maya had seen herself as anything other than a survivor, just getting through each day. As she locked the front door behind her, Maya whispered a small prayer to the universe. She wasn't asking for love or a fairy tale ending. She was just asking for a nice evening, good conversation, and maybe the reminder that she was still a woman with dreams and desires beyond making sure Sophie had clean clothes and healthy meals. The drive to the restaurant felt both endless and far too short. By the time she pulled into the parking lot, her heart was beating so fast she wondered if she might need medical attention herself. She checked her reflection one more time in the rearview mirror, took 3 deep breaths, and stepped out into the evening air. Whatever happened next, she had already accomplished something important. She had shown up for herself, and that felt like victory enough. Maya was halfway to the restaurant when her phone buzzed. She pulled over to check the message, her heart sinking as she expected David to cancel at the last minute. Instead, the text read, "Hey, I'm so sorry, but I had a family emergency. Would it be okay if I picked you up from your house instead? I can explain everything when I see you." She stared at the message for a full minute. Her first instinct was relief. She wouldn't have to walk into a restaurant alone and scan the room for a stranger. But then anxiety crept in. Having him come to her house felt more personal, more real somehow. This was her safe space, the place where she and Sophie had built their little world together. After a moment of hesitation, she texted back her address and turned the car around. The drive home gave her just enough time to second-guess everything. What kind of family emergency? Was this some kind of red flag? Lisa's voice echoed in her head. "You're overthinking again, Maya." Back at home, she paced around the living room, suddenly seeing her house through a stranger's eyes. Sophie's drawings covered the refrigerator. Toys were scattered in the corner despite her cleaning efforts. The couch still had a small stain from when Sophie had spilled grape juice last month. This was real life, not some perfect date scenario from a movie. At exactly 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Maya took a deep breath, smoothed down her dress, and walked to the door. Through the peephole, she could see a man with dark hair, holding something in his hands. She opened the door and found herself looking at someone with the kindest eyes she had seen in a long time. "Maya?" he asked, and his voice was softer than she had expected. "I'm David. These are for you." He held out a small bouquet of sunflowers. Not roses or expensive flowers, but cheerful, simple sunflowers that made her smile despite her nerves. "They're beautiful," she said, taking the flowers. "Thank you." Up close, he was exactly what Lisa had described. Average height, with hands that showed he worked for a living, and a smile that seemed genuine rather than practiced. "I'm really sorry about the change of plans," David said, and she could hear real regret in his voice. "I was all ready to meet you at the restaurant when—" He paused, looking suddenly uncomfortable. "I need to tell you something first, and I completely understand if you want to call this whole thing off." Maya felt her stomach drop. Here it comes, she thought. He's married. He's not actually divorced. He's moving to another state tomorrow. She braced herself for disappointment. David looked over his shoulder toward the street, then back at her. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "My kids are in the car." Maya blinked, certain she had misheard. "Your what?" "My kids," he repeated, his cheeks turning red. "My babysitter canceled about an hour ago. Her own daughter got sick, and I couldn't find anyone else on such short notice. I almost called to cancel our date, but—" He ran a hand through his hair, clearly flustered. "I've been looking forward to meeting you all week. Lisa talks about you all the time, and I thought maybe, if you were okay with it, we could figure something else out." Maya's mind went completely blank. Kids. He had kids. Plural. Lisa had never mentioned children. Not once in all their conversations about this mysterious David had her sister thought to mention that small detail. She looked past David to his car parked at the curb. Sure enough, she could see two small faces pressed against the back window, both staring at her house with obvious curiosity. One appeared to be around Sophie's age, a girl with long dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. The other looked younger, maybe 5 or 6, a boy who was currently making faces at the window. "You have kids," Maya said slowly, as if testing out the words. "2," David confirmed. "Luna is 9 and Alex is 6. Their mom—" He paused and something painful flickered across his face. "She passed away last year. Cancer. It's been just the 3 of us since then." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. She had been prepared for a lot of things. Awkward conversation. No chemistry. Maybe learning he was still hung up on an ex-wife. She had not been prepared for this. A widower. 2 children who had lost their mother. The weight of that reality settled over her like a heavy blanket. "Oh," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." David nodded, his jaw tight. "It's been difficult. We're still figuring things out. That's why I almost didn't do this whole dating thing yet. But Lisa said you're a single mom too, and I thought maybe you'd understand what it's like." Maya looked back at the car. The little boy had his nose pressed against the glass now, and the girl was trying to get him to sit back in his seat properly. Even from this distance, she could see the resemblance to David in their faces. "How long have they been in the car?" she asked. "About 10 minutes. I told them I was just going to explain the situation, and then we'd figure out what to do next. I have snacks and their tablets if we need to take them somewhere kid-friendly instead." Maya's heart did something complicated in her chest. Here was this man, clearly mortified by the situation but still thinking about his children's comfort. He could have lied, could have pretended this was all planned, could have left the kids with whoever and hoped she never found out about them. Instead, he was standing on her doorstep, vulnerable and honest, asking for her understanding. "What were you planning to tell them about me?" she asked. "Just that you're a friend," David said quickly. They haven't met anyone I've dated since their mom died. Because I haven't really dated anyone since their mom died. You're kind of my first attempt at getting back out there." The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Maya could see how much it had cost him to say it. She thought about Sophie, who would be devastated if something happened to Maya. She thought about how carefully she had protected her daughter from her own attempts at moving forward after the divorce. "I have a daughter," Maya said suddenly. "Sophie, she's 8. She's with her dad this weekend." David's eyebrows rose slightly. "Lisa mentioned you have a daughter, but she didn't tell me her age. Luna would love that. She's always saying she wishes she had a sister." They stood there for a moment, 2 single parents on a doorstep, both probably wondering what they had gotten themselves into. Maya could hear her heartbeat in her ears. This was not how she had imagined this evening going. This was messier, more complicated, more real than anything she had prepared herself for. In the car, the little boy had apparently gotten tired of waiting and was now bouncing in his seat. The girl was reading a book, but Maya could tell she was stealing glances at the house. "They must be getting antsy," Maya said. "Yeah, they've been cooped up all day. I promised them ice cream after this, no matter how it went." Maya made a decision that surprised even her. "Why don't you bring them in?" David stared at her. "Are you sure? Because we could just reschedule. I totally understand if this is too much." "I'm sure," Maya said, and realized she meant it. "I have board games. And I think there's still some of Sophie's mac and cheese in the pantry if they get hungry." The relief that washed over David's face was so evident that Maya felt something warm unfold in her chest. "You're amazing," he said quietly. "Thank you." As David walked back to the car to get his children, Maya stood in her doorway and wondered what on earth she was doing. 20 minutes ago, she had been nervous about making conversation with one person over dinner. Now she was about to host a family gathering with 2 kids she had never met and a man who was dealing with grief she couldn't even imagine. But watching David open the car door and seeing the way his children's faces lit up when he told them they were going inside, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Not just nervousness or fear, but anticipation. Maybe tonight wouldn't go according to plan. Maybe that was exactly what she needed. Luna and Alex bounded up the front steps with the kind of energy that only children possess after being cooped up in a car. Maya stepped back to let them through, suddenly aware that her quiet house was about to become very different. "Wow, your house is really pretty," Luna said, her eyes wide as she took in the living room. She was taller than Maya had expected, with her father's kind eyes and a gap-toothed smile that was instantly endearing. Alex, meanwhile, had already spotted Sophie's toy corner and was gravitating toward it like a magnet. "Are these toys for kids?" he asked, looking up at Maya with hopeful eyes. "They belong to my daughter Sophie," Maya explained, "but I'm sure she wouldn't mind if you played with them while you're here." David lingered in the doorway, looking uncertain. "Are you absolutely sure about this? We can still go somewhere else." Maya surprised herself by laughing. "David, relax, come in. I'll make some coffee and we can figure this out as we go." As David stepped inside and closed the door behind him, Maya realized she had no idea what she was doing. The last time she'd had children other than Sophie in her house was probably 2 years ago, before the divorce, when life was different and playdates were part of her normal routine. "Your house smells like cookies," Alex announced from his position on the floor, where he was already examining Sophie's collection of toy cars. "That's probably the vanilla candle," Maya said, touched that he'd noticed something nice. "I lit it earlier because I was nervous about tonight." "Why were you nervous?" Luna asked, settling herself on the couch with the kind of natural confidence that reminded Maya of Sophie. Maya glanced at David, who looked equally curious about her answer. "Well, I haven't been on a date in a very long time," she admitted. "Sometimes when you don't do something for a while, it feels scary to try again." Luna nodded solemnly. "Like when I had to go back to school after summer vacation. I forgot how to talk to people who weren't just Dad and Alex." The simple honesty of the comment hit Maya right in the chest. Here was this little girl who understood exactly what she meant, even if their situations were different. David ran his hand through his hair, a gesture Maya was beginning to recognize as his nervous habit. "I should probably mention that I have no idea what I'm doing either," he said. Lisa made this sound a lot easier than it actually is. "Lisa always makes everything sound easier than it is," Maya said, heading toward the kitchen. "She once convinced me that making Sophie's birthday cake from scratch would be fun and relaxing. I ended up buying one from the grocery store at 10 o'clock the night before the party." David followed her into the kitchen while the kids settled into the living room. "Did Sophie notice?" "She said it was the best store-bought cake she'd ever had." Maya laughed. "Kids are more honest than we give them credit for." Through the kitchen doorway, they could see Luna helping Alex organize the toy cars by color, while she told him a story about each one. The sight made Maya's chest feel warm and tight at the same time. "They're really good together," she observed. "Luna's always been the little mother," David said quietly.
"After Rachel died, she just
stepped into that role. Sometimes I worry she's growing up too fast." Maya turned to face him fully, seeing the exhaustion in his eyes that she recognized from her own mirror. "How are you managing?" "Really managing, I mean." David leaned against her kitchen counter, and for a moment his carefully maintained composure slipped. "Some days are better than others. The hardest part is feeling like I'm failing them both in different ways every day. Luna needs someone to braid her hair and talk about girl things. And Alex needs constant attention and energy that I don't always have after working all day. And you need—" Maya prompted gently. "I need to not think about being a single parent for maybe an hour or two," David finished. "Which is why I was so excited about tonight and then so mortified when the babysitter canceled. I felt like I was dragging my problems into something that was supposed to be just about me for once." Maya understood completely. The guilt of wanting something for yourself when you're a single parent was a constant companion. "Sophie asked me sometimes why I don't have friends over like other moms do," she said. "I always tell her I'm too busy, but the truth is I've forgotten how to be anything other than her mom." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the children's chatter from the living room. Alex was now making vrooming sounds with the cars while Luna provided dramatic commentary about their racing adventures. "You know what?" Maya said suddenly. "Let's order pizza." David looked confused. "What about the restaurant?" "The restaurant will be there next weekend," Maya said, already reaching for her phone. "But how often do we get to just relax and not worry about kids being too loud or making a mess? Besides, I think Luna and Alex might starve if we try to get through a whole dinner at a fancy place." David's whole face changed, the tension leaving his shoulders. "Are you sure? This is not what you signed up for." Maybe it's exactly what I signed up for without knowing it, Maya said, scrolling through the pizza place's number. What do they like on their pizza? Luna loves pepperoni and Alex will eat anything as long as there's cheese, David said. But Maya, you're being incredibly kind about this. I promise our next date will be more normal. Maya paused, phone in hand. You want there to be a next date? Don't you? David asked, and there was something vulnerable in his voice that made Maya's heart skip. Before she could answer, Alex appeared in the kitchen doorway. Maya, Luna wants to know if you have any games we can play together. What kind of games? Maya asked, grateful for the interruption that gave her a moment to process David's question. Board games. Luna says she's really good at Uno, but I'm better at Candyland. Maya grinned. I think I can find something that might work for both of you. 20 minutes later, they were all sitting around Maya's coffee table with pizza boxes open and the game of Sorry spread out between them. Luna had taken charge of explaining the rules to everyone, even though they all knew how to play, while Alex was more interested in arranging his game pieces by color than actually moving them around the board. This is way better than a restaurant, Luna declared, carefully selecting a slice of pizza. Restaurants always want you to use your quiet voice. And they don't let you sit on the floor, Alex added, perfectly content with his position sprawled on the carpet. Maya caught David's eye across the table and saw her own amazement reflected there. Her house, which had felt so quiet and empty just hours ago, now buzzed with conversation and laughter. There were crumbs on her coffee table and juice cups leaving rings on her magazines, and somehow it felt more alive than it had in months. Your turn. Maya, Luna said, holding out the deck of cards. As Maya reached for a card, she realized something had shifted inside her. The nervousness from earlier had been replaced by something warmer and more hopeful. She wasn't just playing a board game with strangers anymore. She was sharing an evening with people who understood the particular challenges and joys of building a family. From the pieces life had left them, David was helping Alex count his moves while simultaneously trying to eat his pizza, and Luna was already planning her strategy for the next 3 turns. They looked like they belonged here in her living room, making her house feel like a home filled with more than just one parent and one child. For the first time in 2 years, Maya could picture her dining table with more than 2 chairs pulled up to it. She could imagine Sophie having someone to play with, while Maya had someone to share the everyday moments with. It was terrifying and wonderful and completely unexpected. And as Alex cheered because he'd managed to send David's piece back to start, Maya realized that sometimes the best things in life were the ones that didn't go according to plan. The next morning, Maya woke up with a smile on her face for the first time in months. The house still smelled faintly like pizza, and she could see the impressions in the carpet where Luna and Alex had sprawled during their board game marathon. She found herself humming while she made coffee, replaying moments from the evening before. David had texted her goodnight after getting the kids home, saying it was the best evening he'd had in over a year. Luna had apparently talked nonstop about Maya during their drive home, asking when they could see her again. Alex had fallen asleep in the car clutching one of Sophie's toy cars that Maya had let him borrow. But as the day wore on, and the warm glow of the evening began to fade, reality started creeping in. Maya found herself sitting on her couch staring at her phone, wanting to text David but not knowing what to say. What did last night actually mean? Where did they go from here? By Monday morning, the doubts had taken root. Maya was back in her scrubs, rushing through her morning routine before her hospital shift. When Sophie called from her father's house, Mom, I had the weirdest dream, Sophie said, her voice still thick with sleep. There were other kids playing with my toys, and you were laughing a lot. It was really loud in our house. Maya's stomach clenched. Just a dream, sweetheart. How's your weekend going? Dad's girlfriend made pancakes, but they weren't as good as yours, Sophie said. She used too much syrup and they got all soggy. I miss our Saturday morning pancakes. After hanging up, Maya sat in her car in the hospital parking lot, her hands shaking slightly. Sophie's innocent comment about the dream felt like a warning. Was she being selfish, wanting something for herself when Sophie was still adjusting to the reality of divorced parents? Her daughter's world had already been turned upside down once. Did Maya have the right to potentially disrupt it again? At work, her colleague Beth noticed Maya's distraction during their break. You look like someone who either had the best weekend ever or the worst, Beth observed, stirring sugar into her coffee. I had a date, Maya admitted, the words feeling strange in her mouth. And? Was he horrible? Did he chew with his mouth open? Please tell me he at least showered. He was actually wonderful, Maya said slowly. That's the problem. Beth raised an eyebrow. I'm going to need you to explain how wonderful is a problem. Maya told her about Saturday night, about David's children, about how natural everything had felt. But as she spoke, she could hear the doubt creeping into her own voice. So let me get this straight, Beth said when Maya finished. You met a nice man who's also a single parent. Your evening together was perfect. The kids got along great, and you're upset because it's complicated, Maya said. Sophie doesn't even know I went on a date. How do I explain to an 8-year-old that I might want to spend time with someone who isn't her father? What if she feels like I'm replacing her dad? What if David's kids don't actually like me once the novelty wears off? What if we try this and it doesn't work out and then 4 people get hurt instead of just 2? Beth was quiet for a moment. Maya, can I ask you something? When was the last time you did something just because it made you happy? Maya opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. She honestly couldn't remember. Look, Beth continued, I'm not saying you should rush into anything, but maybe the question isn't whether you should protect Sophie from the possibility of change. Maybe it's whether you should show her that it's okay to hope for good things, even when they feel scary. That conversation stayed with Maya for the rest of the week. David had called twice and texted several times, but Maya found herself responding with short, polite messages that didn't encourage longer conversation. She told herself she was being cautious, responsible, but deep down she knew she was running scared. David seemed to sense her pulling away. His messages became less frequent, more formal. When he asked if she wanted to meet for coffee on Friday evening, Maya made an excuse about having to work late. When he suggested lunch over the weekend, she said Sophie would be home and she couldn't get a babysitter on short notice. The truth was, Maya had started imagining all the ways this could go wrong. What if David's grief over his wife was still too fresh? What if Maya could never measure up to the memory of someone who had been perfect in her children's eyes? What if Luna and Alex were just being polite, but actually resented the idea of someone trying to replace their mother? And then there were the practical concerns that kept her awake at night. Dating someone with children meant potentially blending 2 households, 2 sets of rules, 2 different ways of doing everything. What if David was too lenient with his kids or too strict? What if their parenting styles clashed? What if Sophie felt left out or overwhelmed by suddenly having siblings? Maya had grown up in a house where her parents fought constantly before their bitter divorce. She remembered the confusion, the feeling of being caught in the middle, the relief when the fighting finally stopped because her father moved out. The last thing she wanted was to create that kind of chaos in Sophie's life. On Thursday evening, Sophie came home from her father's house earlier than expected. Maya was making dinner when her daughter dragged her backpack into the kitchen and slumped into a chair at the table. Dad's girlfriend is moving in with him, Sophie announced without preamble. Maya's hands stilled on the pot she was stirring. How do you feel about that? Sophie shrugged, but Maya could see the tension in her small shoulders. She's okay, I guess. But now she wants to redecorate my room there, and she thinks I should eat more vegetables, and she talks really loud on the phone all the time. Maya sat down across from her daughter, studying her face. That sounds like a lot of changes. Yeah, Sophie said quietly. Sometimes I wish things could just stay the same forever. Like when it was just you and me and I knew what to expect every day. The words hit Maya like a physical blow. Here was her confirmation that Sophie wasn't ready for more change. More people, more complications. Maya felt validated in her decision to pull back from David, but also deeply sad about it. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Maya sat on her couch and allowed herself to really think about David. She missed talking to him, missed the way he listened like what she said actually mattered. She missed watching Luna's confidence and Alex's boundless energy. For a few hours on Saturday night, she had felt like part of something bigger than just her small family of 2. But missing something and being ready for it were 2 different things. Maya had spent 2 years building a stable, predictable life for Sophie. They had routines that worked, boundaries that felt safe, a rhythm that had taken months to establish after the chaos of the divorce. Was it fair to risk all of that for something that might not even work out? Was it selfish to want more when what they had was finally enough? Maya picked up her phone 3 different times to text David, but each time she set it down again without typing anything. What could she say? That she was scared? That she wanted to see him but couldn't figure out how to make it work? that she thought about him and his children every day, but didn't know how to move forward without potentially hurting everyone involved. By Friday night, David's messages had stopped coming altogether. Maya told herself this was for the best, that they were both probably relieved to step back before things got too complicated. But when she found herself checking her phone every 10 minutes and feeling disappointed when there were no new messages, she realized that pulling away hadn't actually made anything easier. It had just made her lonely again, and now she knew exactly what she was missing. 3 weeks had passed since Maya had last talked to David. 3 weeks of telling herself she had made the right choice. 3 weeks of going through the motions of her regular routine. 3 weeks of missing something she had barely had long enough to understand. Saturday morning found Maya and Sophie at the local farmers market, their weekly tradition that had started after the divorce as a way to fill the empty weekend hours. Sophie loved sampling the free fruit and talking to the vendors, while Maya appreciated the normalcy of having somewhere to go that didn't require planning or pressure. They were standing at the honey stand, Sophie carefully selecting which flavor to try next when Maya heard a familiar laugh. Her heart stopped as she turned around and saw David and his children at the vegetable stand across the aisle. Luna was holding up different types of squash for Alex to examine, while David was discussing something with the farmer about cooking times. For a moment, Maya considered grabbing Sophie and leaving before they noticed her, but Sophie had already spotted the other family and was tugging on Maya's sleeve. "Mom, isn't that the man from your dream?" Sophie asked loudly enough that several people turned to look. "What dream, honey?" Maya asked, though her eyes never left David's family. "The one where there were kids playing with my toys and you were laughing. I remember now. I saw them in the dream." Before Maya could respond, Alex had spotted them and was pulling on David's shirt, pointing in their direction. David turned and their eyes met across the busy market aisle. The expression on his face was unreadable. Surprise, maybe hurt, definitely uncertainty. Luna looked over and immediately broke into a huge smile. "Maya, Sophie," she called out, waving enthusiastically. Sophie looked confused but waved back politely. "Do I know them, Mom?" Maya's heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. "They're friends," she managed to say. David appeared to be having a conversation with his children, and Maya could see Luna's face fall slightly when he shook his head at whatever she was asking. They turned to continue their shopping, and Maya felt something crack inside her chest. "Can we go say hi?" Sophie asked. "The girl seems really nice. We should let them shop in peace," Maya said, but her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. As they walked away from the honey stand, Sophie chattering about the different flavors she had tried, Maya couldn't focus on anything except the feeling that she had just let something important slip away again. She kept glancing back, catching glimpses of David's family as they moved through the market, and each time felt the distance between them growing larger. They were loading their purchases into the car when Sophie suddenly stopped and looked at Maya seriously. "Mom, are you sad about something?" Maya paused, a bag of apples halfway to the trunk. "Why do you ask?" "You get this look sometimes. Like when you think I'm not watching, you look sad and lonely, even when we're having fun together." The honesty of her 8-year-old daughter hit Maya harder than any lecture from her sister or advice from her coworker had. "Sometimes grown-ups feel lonely even when they have people they love," Maya said carefully. "Is it because of Dad and his girlfriend?" "No, sweetheart. Dad and I both deserve to be happy even if it's not with each other." Sophie considered this for a moment. "So you deserve to be happy too, right?" Maya stared at her daughter, amazed by the simple wisdom of the question. "I suppose I do. Then why don't you just try to be happy? Like, actually try?" That afternoon, while Sophie was at a friend's house for a playdate, Maya found herself sitting in her car outside the farmer's market, which had closed hours ago. She wasn't sure what she was doing there, but she needed to think somewhere that wasn't her house, surrounded by reminders of the safe, predictable life she had built. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. "Haven't heard from you in weeks. How are things going with David?" Maya stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "I messed up." Her phone rang immediately. "What happened?" Lisa demanded without preamble. Maya found herself telling her sister everything, about the wonderful evening, about her fears, about pulling away, about seeing David at the market and feeling like her heart was breaking all over again. "Maya," Lisa said when she finished, Do you remember what you told me when I was scared to marry Jake? That was different. You two were already together. You told me that the biggest risk in life isn't getting hurt. It's missing out on something beautiful because you're too scared to try. Maya closed her eyes, remembering that conversation. Lisa had been terrified of marriage after watching their parents' bitter divorce, convinced that all relationships were doomed to fail. Maya had spent hours talking her through those fears. But Sophie said she wants things to stay the same, Maya protested weakly. Sophie is 8. She doesn't know what she's missing because she's never seen you truly happy with someone. Kids are more resilient than we think, Maya. And they deserve to see their parents living full lives, not just surviving. After hanging up with Lisa, Maya sat in her car for another hour, watching families walk by on the sidewalk. She saw couples holding hands while their children ran ahead, saw single parents managing everything alone, saw the full spectrum of what family could look like. By the time she drove home, Maya had made a decision. She was going to find David and apologize. She was going to be honest about her fears, but also about what she wanted. And if he was willing to try again, she was going to be brave enough to see where it led. But when she got home, she found David sitting on her front steps with Luna and Alex playing in her front yard. Her heart jumped into her throat as she parked and got out of the car. "I hope you don't mind us being here," David said, standing up as she approached. "Luna has been asking to see you every day for 3 weeks. I finally decided that if you were going to reject us, I'd rather it be clear and final than just fading away." Maya looked at Luna and Alex, who had paused their game to watch the adults. Luna looked hopeful but guarded, while Alex seemed oblivious to the tension, focused on a dandelion he was picking apart. "I owe you an apology," Maya said. "A big one." "You don't owe me anything," David replied. "I understand that things moved too fast. I should have been more careful about bringing the kids into it so early." "No," Maya said firmly. "That's not what happened. What happened is that I got scared of how right it felt, and I convinced myself that protecting Sophie from change was more important than showing her what happiness could look like." David's expression softened. "Maya, I was terrified that we would try this and it wouldn't work out and that 4 people would get hurt instead of just 2. But I realized today that I was hurting all 4 of us by not trying at all." Luna had gotten closer during their conversation, and now she was standing right next to Maya. "Does this mean we can be friends again?" Maya looked down at this brave, sweet girl who had lost her mother and was still willing to open her heart to new people. "I would love to be friends again. If you'll forgive me for being scared and silly." "Everyone gets scared sometimes," Luna said matter-of-factly. "Dad cries sometimes when he thinks we're asleep. But he says it's okay to be sad about Mom and still want good things to happen." David's face flushed, but he nodded. "Luna's right. We can miss what we've lost and still hope for new happiness. They don't cancel each other out." Just then, Sophie's friend's mom pulled into the driveway to drop her off. Sophie bounded out of the car, her face lighting up when she saw the visitors in their front yard. "It's the people from my dream," she announced. "Are you staying for dinner?" Maya looked at David, who was watching her with cautious hope in his eyes. "Would you like to stay for dinner?" she asked. "Only if you're sure," David said quietly. "I'm sure," Maya said, and realized she meant it completely. "I'm sure that I want to see where this goes. I'm sure that I want Sophie to see me trying to build something good. And I'm sure that whatever happens, it's better than hiding from the possibility of happiness." 6 months later, their Sunday dinners had become legendary among their friends. Maya's dining room table, which had sat 2 for so long, now regularly accommodated 4, sometimes 6 when Lisa and Jake joined them. Sophie and Luna had become inseparable, while Alex had appointed himself the family entertainer, always ready with a joke or a silly dance to make everyone laugh. It wasn't always easy. There were nights when Luna cried for her mother, days when Alex acted out because he missed having David's undivided attention, times when Sophie felt overwhelmed by suddenly having siblings. But they talked through the hard moments, celebrated the good ones, and slowly built something that belonged to all of them. Maya learned that blending families wasn't about erasing the past or pretending everything was simple. It was about making room for more love, more laughter, more hands to help with homework, and more voices singing happy birthday. It was about showing children that families could grow and change and still be strong. And as she watched David help Sophie with her science project, while Luna braided friendship bracelets and Alex built elaborate block towers, Maya realized that sometimes the best things in life were the ones that required the most courage to reach for.